This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Child dies from Ebola in DRC's South Kivu province as latest figures say 862 people have been cured. Death toll from Uganda's fuel tanker explosion rises to 22. And Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam says the government is open to dialogue with the public. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. Tax officials in Nigeria on the spot over poor revenue collections. And in sports, teams in last-minute preparations as 2019 African Games officially get underway in Morocco. At least 10 soldiers and an unidentified number of militants have been killed in an attack on a military unit in northern Burkina Faso. In a statement, the army said that the attack occurred in the early hours of Monday morning in the Cote in Somme province, resulting in death and many injuries. Burkina Faso has been overrun by Islamist violence this year that armed forces have been unable to contain. Hundreds of civilians have died and more than 150,000 have fled as the influence of jihadist groups with links to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State spreads across the Sahel region. Moving now to our continued coverage on the Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Health authorities have said a 7-year-old child has died in the South Kivu region. This is the second person to succumb to the virus since the epidemic spread to the eastern province. The announcement last week of the first confirmed cases in South Kivu revived concerns that the highly contagious disease could cross the porous borders of the Central African country, where it has claimed more than 1,900 lives since August last year. The first death in South Kivu was a woman in her 20s who evaded movement controls to travel from the North Kivu town of Beni, the epicenter of the outbreak, to South Kivu's capital, Bukavu, and then Mwenga. The latest outbreak is the second deadliest on record after more than 11,000 people were killed in Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia between 2014 and 2016. A UN spokesperson painted a picture of the now confirmed spread of Ebola to South Kivu province in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Speaking to reporters in New York, UN spokesperson Stephanie Dujarric noted that new cases were confirmed in the village of Mwenga, south of the town of Bukavu. A woman previously identified as a contact for two people who had contracted Ebola died along with her 17-month-old baby. However, her remaining child, who is a 7-month-old baby, is receiving treatment. The World Health Organization has said that its rapid response and teams were sent to the village and have begun raising awareness about the disease. The UN spokesperson also said that in the North Kivu and Ituri provinces, the outbreak transmission continued with an average of 81 new cases per week.
In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Ebola has now spread to South Kivu, with cases confirmed in the villages of Mwenga, that's just south of the town of Bukavu. The World Health Organization reports that rapid response teams were sent to the village. They quickly isolated and treated people with Ebola, traced contacts, began vaccinating, and raising awareness about the disease. In North Kivu and Ituri provinces, the outbreak transmission continues with an average of 81 new cases per week. There are currently no confirmed cases of Ebola outside of the DRC.
Uganda police have confirmed that the death toll from the tanker explosion on Sunday has risen to 22. The fuel truck exploded after the driver lost control, causing it to ram into 3 cars in western Uganda. The incident occurred at a small trading center on a highway between the capital Kampala and Kasese town near the border with the Democratic Republic of Congo. Flames tore through over 20 nearby shops. Fatal road crashes have been linked to lax law enforcement, poorly serviced vehicles, and potholed roads. The accident comes just over a week after a fuel tanker exploded in neighboring Tanzania in the town of Morogoro, killing at least 97 people. Sudan's main opposition alliance has nominated Abdallah Hamdok, an economist who has served in various international institutions as prime minister in the country's transitional government. The nomination is the first step towards the creation of a transitional government which will prepare for free elections after the overthrow of former President Omar al-Bashir in April following months of unrest. So who exactly is Abdallah Hamdok? CGTN's Robert Nagila has more.
Up until Abdallah Hamdok was proposed for position of Prime Minister, little was known about him.
Your Excellency,
Hamdok has over 3 decades of experience in the public and private sectors in administration and policy. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Khartoum and a PhD degree from the School of Economic Studies, University of Manchester. Between 1981 and 1987, he worked as a senior official at the Finance Ministry in Sudan. From 1993 to 1995, he was the head of public sector group at Deloitte & Touche Management Consultants in Zimbabwe. From 1995 to 1997, he was the chief technical officer at the International Labour Organization. In 1997, he joined the African Development Bank as a principal policy economist, a post he held until 2001. He then worked briefly for the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa in 2001 and in 2002 as Director of Regional Integration and Trade. Between 2011 to October 2018, he was the Deputy Executive Secretary of UNECA.
I thank you for your
Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Moving now to Hong Kong, where Chief Executive Carrie Lam says the government is open to dialogue with the public. She says authorities will talk to peaceful protesters and tackle complaints against the police. And she expressed hope that the peaceful protest at Victoria Park over the weekend was the start of an effort to restore order.
We'll immediately set up a dialogue mechanism. When we say dialogue mechanism, we mean we would like to treat each other with respect and fairness to find a way for Hong Kong today. We hope this communication channel can be open and direct so that we can communicate with people of different backgrounds. Other secretaries and I would like to go to the communities and have face-to-face communication with the people. In order to set up this kind of dialogue platform, we'll get in touch with some residents and hear their feedback.
Hong Kong authorities say more than 2 months of demonstrations have seriously affected the region's transportation, public services, and tourism, as well as businesses. Many residents are calling for the public order to be restored. At a press conference, Hong Kong police say they will bring the criminals to justice.
I would like to send a very strong message to you all. The Hong Kong police do not tolerate any acts of violence, regardless of one's background. An unlawful act is an unlawful act. We strongly condemn all violent acts and will investigate it into both incidents very seriously. We pledge that we will bring to justice anyone who breaks the law.
Hong Kong prosecutors say 3 rifles, 1 pistol, and multiple bullet casings in the possession of a 30-year-old unemployed man in Hong Kong have been confirmed as real. Prosecutors say at the trial in a West Kowloon court on Monday that the guns and ammunition in a parcel came from the United States. Hong Kong's Headline Daily is reporting that the defendant, Lam Zing Fung, was charged with unlicensed possession of guns and ammunition. He was arrested with others at the beginning of this year in a raid by the Organized Crime and Triad Bureau of Hong Kong. Meanwhile, former Hong Kong SAR Chief Executive Tung Shihua says he is saddened by the recent violence and believes the current educational system in secondary schools is partly to blame. Spokesperson of the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office of the State Council also says there are problems with the education system in Hong Kong Analysts are expressing concern about the failure of the city's education system to develop an understanding of Chinese national identity.
Hong Kong's educational system promotes liberal studies, which aims to cultivate critical thinking in students. Different schools also have the right to choose different textbooks, as long as the books fit the requirements of the Educational Bureau. But recently, many Hong Kong parents have posted textbooks online, saying they're worried about what their kids are learning at school. This textbook here about mainland society contains the publisher's own opinions. It says the central government is inefficient and lacks internal supervision, but it does not give any case studies or statistics to support the argument. This page here says mainland residents are worshipping Western holidays and forgetting their traditional roots. Also, it features no stats or case studies. The textbook also says mainland residents are generally poorly educated while giving outdated statistics. The second problem, a long controversial one, is that Chinese history is not a compulsory course in Hong Kong schools. Hong Kong netizens have shared their experiences online, saying they do not have to study China's different dynasties or modern history in detail. One comment claims the 8-year-long national war of resistance against Japanese aggression was summarized in just 76 characters. Just before returning to China, education reform introduced Chinese history as an optional course for secondary school students. Chief Executive Carrie Lam announced a change in the curriculum in 2017, saying history will be compulsory from 2018. But then, in 2018, the Education Bureau announced that new guidelines for secondary school history textbooks will be adapted from 2020. The Bureau's head said the new guidelines will stop teaching mainland history and Hong Kong history separately to increase young people's sense of belonging. But a year from the deadline, a working group under the Bureau is yet to release any information on the project. 马克 CGTN.
And to South Africa now, where South Africa has won permission to almost double the number of black rhinos that can be killed as trophies after arguing money raised will support conservation of critically endangered species. The decision was made at the Convention of International Trade in Endangered Species after receiving support from some African nations and opposition from others. Poachers supplying illegal trade in rhino horn decimated numbers in the past, but the population is now growing. About 5,000 black rhinos exist today, almost 2,000 of them in South Africa. Since 2003, South Africa has been allowed to sell hunting rights for 5 black rhinos a year. The latest decision means it can take up to 0.5% of the population, meaning 9 rhinos at today's levels. South Africa said adult males would be protected, or targeted rather, to protect breeding females. The meeting of 183 nations in Geneva also called for protection of oceanic creatures like seahorses. All right, let's get more on the CITES meeting from Julia Lubov in Geneva. Julia, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. Julia, South Africa won permission to double the number of black rhinos that can be likely killed as trophies. Is there a likelihood of this decision being carried out at the final session? Julia.
Well, that's right. This decision was made at the CITES convention here in Geneva earlier this week. And this means that South Africa can now almost double the amount of black rhinos killed as trophies. Well, South Africa argues that the money raised from this will go towards conservation of this species. But since 2003, South Africa was allowed hunting rights for 5 black rhinos a year. And now with this new decision, it means that it can raise this number by 0.5% of the population, which means that now that could be 9 rhinos a year. Well, of course, as you mentioned, 5,000 black rhinos exist in the world today, and almost 2,000 of them are in South Africa. Well, this permit decision was supported by other rhino ranges countries such as Botswana and Zimbabwe, as well as the EU and Canada. And it was opposed by many other nations here at this convention. And of course, this decision could well be overturned in the final session of the CITES convention, which will take place towards the end of this conference on 28th of August. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what the final decision on this is.
All right, Julia, let's talk more about this. Apart from elephants, rhinos, and seahorses, which other species are taking center stage at this year's convention?
Well, exactly. Plenty of other animal species as well as plant and tree species are being discussed at this convention, which takes place every 3 years. Well, giraffes are getting a lot of debate here. Some environmentalists are very concerned about the giraffe population. They say that they are suffering a silent extinction, with the numbers of giraffes being down by almost 40% over the last 30 years. Also, sharks are getting a lot of attention here during talks as well. Global trade in shark fins is driving demand for mako sharks and is pushing them towards extinction as well. Polar bears, monkeys, tortoises, plenty of other plant and tree species are being all up for discussion here during the next week.
All right, Julia, before I let you go, the meeting is still underway. What other big news do you have for us from there?
Well, that's right. So the meeting, this convention, is on until the 28th of August, and they have 2 committee meetings every day, which last for almost the entire day. They also have plenty of side events happening every day. So far, the biggest side event has been calls for Japan to halt its ivory trade. So there's been plenty of action about that here in Geneva. And also, of course, more big news are expected towards the end of this week, when they will be voting on African elephants, and also towards the end of the final session, of course, when we will be hearing the final decisions made at this convention.
All right, that's Julia Leoboff speaking to us from Geneva. We certainly appreciate your insight and expertise on the matter. You are watching Africa Live on CGTN. We've got a lot more news coming your way after the break. Stay tuned.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Somalia government, together with UN agencies working in the country, have recognized female aid workers as part of World Humanitarian Day. Government officials and international agencies have also called for respect and safety of aid workers as Somalia battles security challenges. Here is Michael Karanja with more on that story.
For close to 3 decades now, Somalia has been in turmoil. The ouster of President Mohamed Said Barre was followed by a period of conflict that has since mutated into an insurgency, with Al-Shabaab pushing to establish a strict Islamic Sharia law. As many continue losing their lives, more are displaced.
We are here today to celebrate.
Female aid workers continue being part of teams responding to situations and are now being recognized and celebrated.
As a government, we salute the women working in the humanitarian sector and acknowledge that they have fundamental challenges such as insecurity, patriarchal attitudes, and harassment on a daily basis. They face tremendous challenge on the ground. I'm convinced that we need to use a platform to address these real changes for women in the field.
As they respond to man-made calamities and those occasioned by climate change, they are exposed to dangers. UNICEF's representative in the country is asking that these aid workers be respected and protected.
Evidence shows that when women are involved in humanitarian action, including at the decision-making level and at the leadership levels, the humanitarian response is more effective and especially also more inclusive. This is why many humanitarian organizations, including the UN and NGOs, are striving to achieve gender parity across the organizations.
Veteran Somali humanitarian worker Aisha Shaur was nominated as Somalia's Humanitarian Person of the Year. She has been involved in championing the rights of women and children by pushing for gender equality. Another honored worker is Amina Haji, who is the founder of Save Somalia Women and Children. The organization aids victims of gender-based violence.
To be a female aid worker in Somalia means a lot. It's an opportunity, risks and challenges. It's an opportunity to reach out to women, children, elderly affected by disaster and respond to their needs.
Days like today, it is a bright light, even amongst the people we have lost this year, unfortunately, to say we're still grateful and we're going to keep the charge going, and our light will not dim until we can work with every beneficiary so they're able to live their lives completely.
The World Humanitarian Day is celebrated on 19th August. It is meant to honor humanitarian efforts while advocating for the safety and security of humanitarian aid workers. The date was selected in honor of the 22 UN workers who were killed in a terrorist attack in Baghdad on 19th August 2003. Michael Karanja, CGTN.
In South Sudan, the World Food Program says over 6.9 million people are facing food shortage. This is being blamed on years of conflict and climate change. Here's Daniel Arap Moy with more on that story.
On the day when humanitarian workers were being feted, one of the beneficiaries of their efforts speaks out.
I was a refugee in Kenya, in Kakuma, and I benefited from WFP service. Now I work with WFP South Sudan. I love to work with the community. I love to deliver good quality service to the community. They deserve safety. They deserve integrity. They deserve dignity from me.
But the World Food Program says South Sudan is starving. According to the UN agency, over 6.9 million people are facing food shortages. This is being blamed on years of conflict, which so many people fail to plant due to insecurity and displacement. More people have sunk into poverty, and the country's economy suffers effects of 5-year civil war. Failed rains in East and Horn of African regions are also a contributing factor. The signing of a peace agreement in September 2019 has enabled more humanitarian workers access regions that were unreachable during the civil war. With this, the number of people in need of food aid continues to rise. Cases whose plight had not been previously reported. According to WFP, the most affected regions are Jonglei, Lakes and Upper Nile. The organization is also calling for more funding as it seeks to distribute food to the affected areas, whose situation continues to escalate with each passing day. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN.
Local and international aid organizations in Nigeria are looking for ways to decrease their vulnerability in crisis-ridden areas. Organizations face threats in conflict areas, especially women. This was among the issues raised after the conference to mark this year's World Humanitarian Day. CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam has more.
Representatives from government, local and international aid agencies converge in the headquarters of the West African regional body, ECOWAS. It's a critical time for appraisal of the humanitarian crisis facing the region and constant dangers which face humanitarian aid workers who are now targets of insurgents.
Sometimes they are faced with extreme threats that affect their survival, especially in disaster situations, such as violent conflicts. Unfortunately, it has always been from time immemorial and impacted so much on both local and international aid workers.
Boko Haram's 10-year-old insurgency has left a devastating impact, especially in the country's northeastern region. Tens of thousands have been killed in the conflict, about 40 of them aid workers. 7.1 million people are estimated to be in dire need of humanitarian assistance in the 3 northeast affected states of Borno, Adamawa and Yobe.
The ECOWAS Commission will continue to work with member states and partners to promote the protection of humanitarian workers through policy orientation and advocacy. In this regard, the Commission has since 2013 been providing assistance to the affected population in the northeast of Nigeria. As part of activities to mark this year's commemoration, the Commission, in collaboration with the Nigerian government, will be providing water, boreholes, and rehabilitating damaged schools and health facilities in communities affected by the crisis in the northeast of Nigeria.
The Nigerian military have repeatedly said that Boko Haram is defeated, but the group continues to stage attacks on soft targets and military bases. What's more, access is often impeded by ongoing hostilities and inaccessible roads. As a result, more than 800,000 people are totally cut off from aid. Kelechi Amekalam, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
In 1647, a Dutch ship called the Haarlem was wrecked in a storm off the coast of South Africa. As a result, the ship's survivors came into contact with the indigenous people of the region, eventually establishing Cape Town. A team of South African maritime archaeologists believe they have discovered the site of the wreck, and there are hopes that it could invigorate new tourism. CGTN's Travis Andrews has more on this.
The recent discovery of what is now thought to be the Haarlem's final resting place has brought a renewed focus on this age-old tale that just couldn't be solved. But now that the team have a location, they're hatching a plan to unearth the lost ruins of the wreck right on the beach, which is also a popular swimming and kite surfing spot for locals and tourists. While the excavation may prove to be an engineering challenge, there is great spectator value that could be extracted from an operation that is likely to play out in front of a live audience.
I mean, there's going to be people working around, but I mean, some sort of viewing area or platform around the outside or from the beach a bit higher up could definitely offer some, well, actually a rare chance to see an ancient relic for that matter. I could see that definitely attracting some visitors.
The location, many believe, is also perfectly suited to a tourism-style event, with hotels, residential areas, parking and shops all close to the wreck site. It's also just a few minutes away from the city centre. The team have already found artifacts they believe is intimately connected to the Haarlem, including this more than 370-year-old necklace they believe was worn by one of the 62 survivors. It's a story which also needs telling.
Experience of the shipwreck survivors and the establishment of the survivor camp ultimately led to the establishment of Cape Town as a refreshment station and then a permanent settlement in the Cape, again leading to more exploration of the southern tip of Africa and the establishment of the trade route.
But this wreck is not an anomaly. The west coast is littered with wrecks all the way up to Namibia, and this weather-induced phenomenon could prove to be somewhat of a drawcard for wreck enthusiasts as well. This will also not be the first time that a wreck is uncovered right here on this beach. The Commodore 2 wreck also lies quite close by and attracts some tourists as well. And the project's team believe once the diggers get the green light to excavate the Haarlem, it will be a sellout event for hotels, restaurants and the like. A time period has also been identified, which falls within the peak holiday season.
The construction would happen around summer. Here in the Cape, the wave climate during summer times it's a lot more gentle, smaller waves, and that, which would make the construction a lot easier to do, and obviously safer as well for the excavation on the inside.
But this historical event all relies on the money being found to fund the excavation operation. And once that is in place, then the shipwreck's final story can be unearthed, which will be a real treat for those lucky enough with ringside seats to the event. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Tourists are slowly trickling back to the beaches of Cote d'Ivoire after a terror attack shocked the nation 3 years ago. But efforts to revive tourist resorts in the country are hampered by underfunding and lack of infrastructure. CGTN's Tuli Shabalala takes a look.
Grand Bassam was once considered the jewel of Cote d'Ivoire.
Now it houses rows of decaying buildings and sun lounges lie empty on the beach. President Alassane Ouattara's administration aims to make Cote d'Ivoire Africa's 5th biggest tourism destination from 2025. The country has major plans to bring back tourists and their cash. But to do this, resorts here desperately need funding. Grand Bassam is still recovering from an attack by Al-Qaeda in 2016.
Les Ivoiriens sont quand même un peuple chaleureux.
The Ivorians are very warm people and not aggressive. These qualities attract people. But we need above all for the authorities in charge to give us a helping hand. It's infrastructural help, it's help with advertising.
International tourists used to laze around the beach, but they have dramatically reduced in numbers.
There are no tourists except for tourists from the diaspora. But anyhow, as a female tourist on my own, there are no security concerns. People are really ready to assist for free.
There's no kind of information about Grand Bassam, how to travel, how to get to this place. And there's no kind of signboard or information for the tourist. So, and again, language is a barrier as well.
For hotel and resort managers, reviving the tourist industry will also involve a lot of cleaning. Plastic and litter have polluted the beaches.
There are no companies or young people who will help others at sea. There are only volunteers. They do what they can, but they have nothing.
In town, local businesses are calling for the 19th century buildings to be restored to their former glory.
We are waiting for all these houses that are part of the heritage to be renovated, and we are asking the Minister of Tourism to give us some support so that we can restart tourism. This will allow foreigners to have more access here.
Signs of a rebound are starting to appear. Tourism agencies are popping up across the country. Many are using social media to grow their businesses.
I inform my subscribers about traveling. I direct them to destinations. I advise them about credible travel agencies that they can turn to and will give really affordable prices. And I also direct them to credible hotels that have good prices, that do not change their prices, and have impeccable service.
According to the Ivorian government, the number of tourists in the country is slowly rising. Tourism has grown by 12.7% between 2016 and 2017. Government wants further growth and is seeking $5.8 billion from the African Development Bank to implement its plan. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
The news continues on Africa Live. We've got your business news coming up next. Let's take a look at the headlines. Tax officials in Nigeria on the spot over poor revenue collections. Egypt's annual inflation rate declines to 7.8% in July. Nigeria is my home. 160 million vibrant, ambitious individuals constantly seeking the perfect self-expression. It is these people who inspired me to be that person that is seen, to be a voice that is heard, and ultimately to be the anchor that I am. I have to tap in, tune in, and turn on the very best qualities within me to deliver the news. I'm Richard Nta, an anchor for CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Nigeria's tax officials are on the spot for repeatedly failing to meet collection targets. President Muhammadu Buhari has queried Chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service, Babatunde Fowler. Fowler has questioned over dwindling tax revenues since the inception of the current government in 2015. The president's office has asked the tax agency to account for significant variances in the budgeted collections and actual collections by the agency of each in the years 2015 to 2018. Despite hitting its highest revenue collection in 2018, the FERS has witnessed tax revenue shortfalls of $2.7 billion to $5.5 billion. The agency projected $22 billion in collections for 2019. There are fears that Nigeria is faced with a fiscal crisis, and the government has been cutting back on expenditure lately, this despite a slow in economic growth. Egypt's finance ministry is earmarking a debt-to GDP ratio of 77.5% by 2022 from the current 90.8%. The ratio has over the years been lowered from 108% in June 2017 to 98% in 2018 as the government pushes to achieve success in economic reform programs. The debt reduction is expected to provide more resources for various sectors, including healthcare, create job opportunities, and also improve the sustainable use of public finances. The country's finance ministry hopes to diversify the funding sources in the 2019-2020 fiscal year once the deposit rate is decreased by the banks. Well, Egypt's Central Agency for Public Mobilization and Statistics says the country's inflation rate dropped to 7.8% in July from around 8.7% in June. The decline is a relief for the North African economy, which has suffered from a recession since its 2011 uprising. From Cairo, here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim.
Gamal Mohammed is grocery shopping for his family of 3. He says that prices of some items have dropped for the first time in a while.
The prices are much cheaper than I expected. I think it's because that there has been a huge supply of goods in the market. Tomatoes, for example, are at 5 Egyptian pounds only. That's half the price 2 months ago. Mainly the prices of vegetables and meat have dropped the most.
Gamal is optimistic of better times ahead.
The signs are clear. For the first time, the prices remain fixed during Eid holidays. In the past, prices increased during the holidays. Also, there was a salary rise last month, so we have no complaints anymore.
Inflation has surprisingly dropped to its lowest in 4 years. This is in spite of electricity and fuel subsidy cuts in July that should have raised prices.
The success of the economic reform program and economic policies, also the success in controlling the markets and traders, has prevented unrealistic price hikes.
Rigorous economic reforms have had a load on Egyptians. Inflation had reached a record high 33% in 2016, but officials had promised the positive effects of these reforms would be felt end of 2019.
The central bank and the government are working on making the economy strong to sustain any shocks from abroad and to be a competitive market internationally to improve living conditions.
Experts predict that inflation will continue to drop in the next 2 quarters and to reach around 7% by mid-2020. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Trading at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange opened slightly higher on Tuesday as local stocks, including groceries giant ShopRite, report full-year results. Investors' appetite for risk was given a small boost overnight on reports that the U.S. will give customers that do business with Huawei another 90-day reprieve before restrictions against the Chinese company kicks in. However, the boost to risk sentiment was curbed by the U.S. government's addition of another 46 Huawei affiliate companies to its blacklist. After the S&P 500 index closed 1.2% up overnight, analysts at Singapore's OCBC Bank said Asian markets may extend gains today amid olive branch for Huawei. And in Uganda, taxpayers are protesting the planned move by the government to tax workers' retirement benefits. The proposed amendments contained in the National Social Security Bill 2019 will allow the government to tax the money workers receive when they retire, as opposed to the current law, which taxes the contributions they make while they're still working. It's just one proposal in the bill that's raising criticism from members of the public. CGTN's Hilary Ayasega reports.
Michael Kabuka is a contributor to the Workers' Pension Scheme, also known as the National Social Security Fund. He's been saving with the scheme for 10 years now. Kabuka is concerned that the tax on his savings could be hiked under the proposed amendments.
The question is, how much tax will I pay when I am actually getting the benefit? Because I get it as a lump sum, we are not sure, is it at what rate? It would be at 40%, which is the highest rate, because imagine if I get 1 million now and I get, say, 10 million or 20 million afterwards when I'm retiring, that should be subject to tax. But is it at the tax rate of 40%, 30% or 20%?
Kabuka and others want the proposed amendments to focus on taxing annual interest rather than taxing the benefit. The current law was enacted in 1985. But the government believes it no longer adequately represents the best interests of taxpayers. It says the proposed amendment will help eliminate double taxation.
Instead of having two places where the funds are being taxed, let's have the funds being taxed at the very end so that it allows the fund to invest more. It allows the individual to have a bigger take-home pay. And also it allows the government to collect more taxes, but also the member to get a bigger social security balance when they retire.
The proposed amendments also compel all workers in formal employment to contribute to the fund. Government figures show that the country has 19 million workers, and out of this, only 5 million contribute to the fund. Under the proposed amendments, the government is also seeking to borrow directly from the fund, a concern to some opposition lawmakers.
Government is actually borrowing. It is the biggest borrower from the fund. Why are they now seeking to provide for direct borrowing? Do they want to borrow it at an interest rate which is lower than the treasury bill? And that would be dangerous.
The government argues more people saving will widen the country's tax base. And taxpayers like Kabuka could walk away with a bigger paycheck upon retirement. Parliament will vote on the proposals in the coming weeks. Hilary Ayasega, CGTN, Kampala.
And in South Africa, one car wash has become a home away from home for people living in suburban Johannesburg. At Tubbs Car Wash, customers are getting their wheels clean while having a haircut. At the same time, they are allowed to tuck into traditional South African cuisines as they spot some top-end cars. CGTN's Angela Coppola explains.
Car washes have been operating in and around South African townships and doing good business for their owners for many years. But what about people who have moved out of the townships into suburbia to be closer to their offices?
Our market is not just your average person. It's a director, it's a business person, it's a doctor, it's professionals. It's people that live within the suburbs where it's hard to literally get this type of food. So we've made it easier and provided a solution for people to literally drive from Sandton just down the road to just come get their favorite kind of meal.
It's a one-stop shop for people looking to get stuff done, including a haircut.
So it's more convenient for our clients because they can have a haircut at the same time they wash their cars, they get food. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing the barber shop in this place.
People keep coming back here. It's a reminder of what life was like before they moved to the big city.
I love the vibe here. Love the people. Like you say, it's home away from home. It is so convenient for me because I can eat, I can wash my car, and sometimes I use the hair salon facilities here.
I think for people who doesn't like to go to the malls and do all the stuff, it's easier for them to have everything right here.
Entrepreneurs spot opportunities in the weirdest of places, and once they've established that there is a need and there is a market, the people are going to be coming, and they've been coming here for years now. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And we're not done just yet. We've got a lot more amazing, wonderful, and inspiring stories coming your way. Let's take a sneak peek at the headline. Nigerian artist creates charcoal art that easily deceives the eyes.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Cote, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Hyperrealism is an unusual genre of painting resembling high-resolution photography. Nigerian artist Bolaji Ona-Olapo is taking this art form to another level. Using charcoal, his artwork seems to fool the eye. CGTN's Kelechi Makalam has more.
An image like this would leave one wondering if it's a drawing or a black and white photograph. It's the handwork of hyperrealism artist Bolaji Ona-Olapo. Originally a graduate of building, Bolaji's childhood passion has now become his main profession. But what's unique about his art is his medium of expression, which is charcoal.
Charcoal is something dear to me. Not like I have any scientific reason behind charcoal, but of recent, when I became a professional artist, I realized that most artists don't use charcoal because it's very difficult to control. It can get messy real quick if you're not used to that medium. So I decided to create a niche for myself with charcoal.
Bolaji's charcoal paintings are earning him some popularity here. More and more people are finding his works quite interesting.
A lot of people appreciate it, and I think Nigeria is really waking up to hyperrealism art. We are more like an export of hyperrealism outside Nigeria. I get messages on my social media, I get people coming to my studio to watch me work. So I think people really appreciate it, and I'm happy about that.
Bolaji has been making business sense of his artworks here at home. Depending on the drawing, size, and inspiration for it, an artwork could sell for as low as $100 and as much as millions. Now he's looking to expand his horizon beyond the shores of Nigeria.
Next 5 years, I should be exhibiting all over the world. Hopefully next year, I should be exhibiting in 2 or 3 countries. So I have a plan of going fully international, not just being in Abuja and creating my art for Abuja. I believe my art is meant for everyone. Everybody can relate to what I produce.
Inspired by his environment and love for nature, Bolaji hopes to use his art to give back to the cause of saving the environment. Kelechi Makalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
What a remarkable story. Moving on to South Africa now, where we meet Danny Njoli. He is a Zimbabwean-born contemporary expressionist artist. His paintings made from acrylic are a vivid and masterful reflection of the human face. Inspired by the beauty he sees when observing people's expressions, CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has this story.
Danny Njoli's interest in art was sparked in primary school in Bulawayo, Zimbabwe. Since then, he has traveled some journey in his art-making endeavors. After being rejected by many who didn't understand his work, he was finally welcomed by the Living Artist Emporium, an art incubation establishment.
LAE
I came across it while I was just going around, like looking for art galleries to display my works. So it so happened like every door that I was knocking on, like you know, they were shunning my works and saying it's not really there. It didn't have like that. It's not what they were looking for.
Since then, Nta has created much acclaimed artwork. His use of color and brushstrokes are on par with the best. Nta's body of work consists of mainly portraits, which he creates using vibrant and violent strokes using acrylic paint. His point of reference is mainly female portraits and sometimes children.
Females in particular, because I find them appealing. Like, you know, the beauty and everything that is got to do, like, you know, with women, like the strength that they have. So whenever, like, you know, when I'm on the internet, I try to look, you know, for those strong, powerful women, and I'm usually attracted, like, to the eyes, because that is what helps me, like, to make my paintings more appealing. I'm also infatuated, like, with color, you know, like using, you know, like sort of like interwoven, clustered sometimes. Brushstrokes, the different colors, muddy colors. That's my interest for now.
Nta's artwork is now well sought after, with many art lovers happy to adorn his work on their walls.
You know, seeing people looking at your art, appreciating it for what it is. Yeah, and even more, like if somebody purchases it and then puts it like on their in their beautiful homes to adorn their walls. That's the most, to me, that's the most that's the most fulfilling feeling. I can't even express it in words.
Njoli's work has now even been bought by art lovers from the rest of the continent and some parts of the world. Yoli Jamila for CITES in Johannesburg, South Africa.
We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Don't go away, don't touch that dial. Here's a sneak peek at the headline. Teams in last-minute preparations as 2019 African Games officially gets underway in Morocco.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are